we'll have quite a bit of time before it reaches us.
Il y a un énorme feu qui est en train de se faire sur la colline.
Ça va hyper vite.
All over the world, megafires are destroying entire towns and regions.
We were encircled by fire. It was like a freight train coming towards you.
Heavenly Father, please help us.
Megafires are different. They are beyond our control. They are insatiable.
C'est des mégawatts de puissance. C'est une centrale nucléaire qui se déplace toute seule.
Might as well be dropping wet paper dollar bills from your airplanes for all the good it's going to do on that fire.
We are in conflict with nature. But why has it unleashed this inferno on our forests and homes?
In many areas, we're literally sitting on a powder keg. We need to face some tough truths.
Scientists and firefighters are taking up the challenge with new methods.
This is the Missoula Fire Sciences Laboratory. The entire building is filled with people studying fire.
Nous avons une trentaine d'arbres en fer. On essaie de se rapprocher au plus près du terrain réel.
Also under scrutiny, our own role in creating this crisis.
The causes of the fire are social. Problems start 20 years before when nobody did land management.
It's really up to humans to figure out how to rebalance everything, and we can do that.
It's a race against time to save our habitat and our lives.
We have about 20 years to get the needed work done.
How can we survive the new era of megafires? May 1st, 2016, in Fort McMurray, Canada. A forest fire starts belching out smoke. But for people in this prosperous oil sands town, it's business as usual.
Part of living here is you get used to forest fires. You get used to smoke for a big part of the summer. And so nobody really worries when smoke floats into town.
But this time, the town was faced with a megafire.
Suddenly, the 911 alarm went off. It was actually the city dispatcher who said, hey, it looks like this fire is going to make contact with the city. We need your help. And our captain said, well, what do you need? How much do you need? And they said, send everything. Everything that you have. Nobody has ever said, send everything.
And nobody expected the fire to attack people's homes.
The very first place we were dispatched was this area in, it's called Grayling Terrace. And about 5 minutes after we took this short 10-second video, there was 10 houses on fire.
A 1,000 firefighters were mobilized from all over Canada. But they were powerless before the destructive force of what locals called the beast. In just a few days, 3 suburbs were burned to ashes.
It just constant loss day after day after day, and it really wasn't safe for us to be in there anymore.
Well, here we are leaving the roundabout.
Getting out of town just in time.
Getting the fuck out of Dodge. I can feel the heat here.
Holy fuck.
This is insane. Holy fuck.
88,000 people, the whole town, ran for their lives.
This is fucking crazy.
We are an industry town based on oil and based on shift work. So in the middle of the day, there's thousands of people that could be sleeping. We started knocking on doors. We used the speaker systems in our cars, our loud hailers. The city was announcing that it's time to leave. You can see the big red line that runs through the middle is our Highway 63, and that's the main highway through town. It's the only way out.
Everyone was trying to get out at the same time. The gas stations were running out of gasoline. I had like a quarter of a tank of gas that we were panicked about. And then as we got maybe 40 minutes out of town, everything hit me. And I realized I might never see Lucas again.
Adrian and everyone else spent a month in emergency shelters.
Nobody died in that fire, and that is the absolute best we could have hoped for, to get everybody out and save those lives.
The beast swallowed several thousand homes and 5,000 square kilometers of forest. At nearly 10 billion Canadian dollars, it was the most destructive wildfire in the history of Canada. Even worse, the beast was not an exception, but is part of a global trend. Uncontrollable megafires have struck in Canada and in California. They are burning millions of acres in the Amazon and are threatening lives in Europe, Russia, and even Siberia. They have reached China, Indonesia, and Australia. The world's forests are on fire. At this center in Brussels, the European Union monitors emergencies around the globe, from earthquakes and floods to volcano outbreaks and tropical cyclones. But a third of all emergency calls are for wildfires.
Let's go to Italy, if you want. The floor is yours.
The forest fires in Italy continue to affect the southern regions of the country, in particular Sicily.
Firefighter Claire Kovalevsky has first-hand experience battling flames. Now, she helps European countries tackle wildfires.
Nous pouvons voir qu'aujourd'hui, c'est principalement l'Europe du Sud et l'Italie avec la Sicile qui est particulièrement impactée avec une forte activité. Donc aujourd'hui, nous allons devoir suivre environ une centaine de feux. Mais sur les journées où les températures sont extrêmement hautes et les niveaux de sécheresse atteints extrêmement haut également, nous pouvons suivre jusqu'à plus de 1000 feux par jour.
Megafires can be seen from space. Europe's satellites are on fire watch and capturing some worrying trends.
Une des tendances que nous avons remarquées ici au centre de coordination est l'intensité de plus en plus forte des feux. On a l'exemple de la Grèce, Mati, en 2018, où plus de 100 personnes sont décédées à la suite de ces feux de forêt.
More extreme fires also struck in Portugal and Spain.
Nous avons de plus en plus de feux en hiver et au début de printemps, et nous avons plus de saison feu de forêt en tant que telle que nous la définissions jusqu'à présent.
Fires are now striking all year round. In California, we saw 2 huge blazes in November and over Christmas.
Jämfört med igår brinner nu dubbelt så mycket skog och mark i Sverige.
Unexpectedly, megafires are also threatening new territories in the north.
En 2018, de nombreux feux sont apparus en Suède, au Royaume-Uni, en Allemagne, en Pologne, en Lettonie. Tous ces pays qui habituellement ne sont pas affectés par ce phénomène ont dû être confrontés à des feux de forêt relativement importants. Et c'est vraiment une nouveauté de ces dernières années.
All over the world, the fires are pushing our resources to the limit. Trade fairs for aerial firefighting like here in France, offer a growing arsenal of weapons for the war against fire. But the new technology, like simulators, virtual reality, and chemical flame retardants, does not come cheap. EU countries are now spending 2 billion euros a year on firefighting. The US is spending more than $2 billion. But can technology protect us from megafires?
We have very large airplanes, very large helicopters, lots of equipment on the ground, lots of people, fire engines, all of that. And there is no trend that we can see that indicates that we will ever be able to control extreme wildfires.
Air tankers are amazing, and that's what everybody wants to see. But they also can't be used in most situations. When it's windy, you can't use them in rugged terrain, which is where most of our fires are. And so you've got this situation where, yeah, air tankers make people feel really good because it's like, oh, it's obvious that there's a fire suppression action occurring here. But it doesn't actually do a lot of good on the ground. And yet we've now spent millions of dollars putting on a nice air show for people.
Like the Swedish government, which called in the army to stop a fire by bombing it. The rush of air from the explosion snuffed out the fire. But are we winning the battle and losing the war?
Some folks wonder if we just beef up fire suppression a little bit more tankers, more fire crews, more retardant bombers, we can deal with wildfire effectively. The evidence says otherwise. The return on our investment with expanding fire suppression investment in the US is actually declining. We're getting less effectiveness. So we're pretty clear we can't solve this with fire suppression alone.
Can we find a different strategy to save our forests and our habitat?
Today, wildfire is a hungry beast that devours forest. And it wasn't always like that. It was a friend of man once upon a time.
Fire ecologist Paul Hesberg is an internationally renowned expert who has dedicated several decades to the question of why the fires are becoming more extreme.
So the bottom line is that we need to face some tough truths.
And this starts with a trip into the past, to the time when European settlers arrived in the US. The new inhabitants immediately exposed the forest to a higher fire risk, as they set up logging operations, constructed homesteads, and lit fires to cook food and clear land. New technology further increased the fire risk.
There were 4 major railroad lines that were crisscrossing the country east to west, from north to south, and the trains in the heat of the summer would give up sparks, and they would often spread into nearby slash and grasses, and so fires would start with the passage of trains. The turning point was the 1910 Big Burn.
1910 was a year of drought. Then, a sudden wind whipped up some small fires into a giant blaze all across Idaho, Montana, and Washington state. This catastrophe would fundamentally change our approach to firefighting. A witness left a testimony.
The canyons seemed to act as chimneys, through which the wind and fire swept with the roar of 1,000 freight trains. Many really thought that it was the end of the world.
This search for survivors and bodies went on for weeks. The Big Burn was the largest fire in U.S. history. In just 2 days, it destroyed 3 million acres of forest and $1 billion worth of timber. 87 people lost their lives. The community was left traumatized.
It paralyzed us with the fear of wildfire. Suddenly, wildfire becomes public enemy #1 in the United States.
A new enemy needs a new type of defense. In the US and in Canada, a new firefighting service declared war on fire.
The United States Forest Service developed its own airborne squadron, smoke jumpers, parachute firefighters.
A deadline was set. All fires were to be put out by 10 a.m. the next morning.
They had to develop a machine, a mechanism to be able to do that. So there was new training programs and firefighting crews that had to be developed, and methods had to be developed to successfully deploy people safely and put fires out. And we got so good at it that we were able to put out 95 to 98% of all wildfires, coast to coast, every single year.
As most of the fires were caused by humans, the authorities recruited the general population into the war against fire, with the help of a very special mascot.
Remember, only you can prevent forest fires.
With your funny hat and frizzy hair, I love the manly way you say, put out fires, put matches away. I think I love you, Smokey Bear.
Fire suppression worked for a really long time. From, let's say, 1935 to 1985, 50 years of hyper success. Then after 1985, we see acres burned going back up, just like before the pre-fire suppression era. Where was this benefit of fire suppression? It was going away. It was looking like a leaky bucket. I'd like to show you something. I've got these great panoramic photos showing this landscape from the 1930s and then again today. And what we see is in the 1930s, there was so far fewer trees, maybe 10 or 20% of the trees that we see today. And why did that happen? The small and medium-sized fires were really frequent on this landscape, and they played an incredibly important role. They're burning up dead wood and thinning out trees. You had this patchwork of burned and recovering and forested area. So this limited the frequency of the really large fires because fires would run into already burned places where the fuel was consumed, and so they couldn't get big that often. That patchiness is gone from the landscape. During that period of 100 years when we kept fire out of the woods, all sorts of trees of different sizes and species, from seedlings and saplings to small poles, they filled in the spaces between the big trees, and they created what we call a fuel ladder. Vast areas have these fuel ladders. They convey fire from the forest floor up through the branches and into the canopies of the large trees. Now you add a continuous puff of wind to that, and that wildfire can spread through the canopy for hectare after hectare after hectare.
California and Greece in 2018, Fort McMurray in 2016, Black Saturday in Australia. All these fires spread out of control because humans stack the furnace with decades of accumulated fuel. And now, yet another man-made factor is bringing things to a head.
My first experience of fire was when I was 1 year old. It was my birthday. I had a birthday cake and one candle, and I was drawn to that flame like a moth. And I stuck my finger in the flame and started to howl and cry, but because I was so fascinated, I kept my finger in that flame. And ever since then, I've been studying fire.
Mike Flanagan has uncovered the complex relationship that exists between fire and climate. For him, that's the secret to what happened in Fort McMurray.
In Canada, our area burn has doubled since the 70s. And my colleagues and I attribute this to human-caused climate change. In winter, our boreal forests are covered with snow. But instead of the snow melting slowly and the moisture soaking into the ground, now, because of climate change, the snow is melting rapidly and a lot of that moisture runs off. So there's not enough moisture for the trees and the vegetation during the growing season, making them more prone to drought during the summer.
For each degree of warming, trees would need 20% more water. But because of drought, the opposite happens.
And with climate change comes hotter and drier summers, which means trees lose more moisture through evapotranspiration.
In other words, even more water evaporates from the leaves into the atmosphere.
Now, the trees can defend themselves by shutting down the pores called stomata, but when they do this, they don't grow as well, making them more susceptible to disease, insect, and fire.
The impact can be seen not only in Canada, but all over the globe. An example is the idyllic scenery of Lake Tahoe, on the border between California and Nevada. Here, drought has taken a terrible toll and multiplied the fire risk.
There was an article back in April that listed the 10 most risk towns in California, particularly in the Sierra Nevada, and Kings Beach was listed as one of them.
A forest and conservation biologist at the University of California, Patricia Maloney is investigating a huge catastrophe that has befallen forests in the U.S., Canada, and in Europe.
When the drought started hitting in 2015, I was really curious and wanted to know why and how some trees were dying. This is a 12 funnel trap for capturing bark beetles. And this lure here attracts the mountain pine beetle. And bark beetles, for the most part, have very poor sight. And they're thinking it's a tree, and so they fly over here, and then they can't fly out once they capture down, get into the funnel, and then they fall down into the cup below. So today in this trap, we've captured about 35 to 50 mountain pine beetle. In 2016, in this location, each week over the course of 4 weeks, we captured between 500 to 1,000 mountain pine beetle.
And those beetles know how to plan a mass invasion.
Here we have a drought-affected tree, and when they're stressed by drought, they'll emit ethylene, and beetles go by smell. So they smell that the tree is stressed because they can smell that ethylene. So they come moving towards this tree to try to attack it. And then once you have enough bark beetles that are trying to invade a tree, they in turn send off a pheromone, a chemical that it basically tells all their friends to come over, party in this tree. We see a number of pitch tubes here. And you could see there are many pitch tubes that go all the way up this, and then you see all this streaming pitch coming down. And that's a physical defense of the tree, trying to pitch out and wall off the bark beetle from getting inside the tree and killing it. This tree is still alive. Right now, it's still trying to defend itself.
But drought leaves other trees too dry to produce any resin at all. Free entry to the party.
You get thousands of beetles in there, and they begin to compromise water uptake. And so between a drought event and massive amounts of bark beetles, this tree is just about dead.
Just in California, beetles have invaded and killed an estimated 120 million trees. In Europe as well, heat waves and drought have caused waves of deadly beetle attacks in France, Spain, and even Scandinavia. More fodder for the next beast on the prowl.
In many areas, we're literally sitting on a powder keg. The area burned in the US by wildfire since 2000 to today is going to double or triple in the next 30 years.
But even the biggest powder keg will only explode if the fuse is lit. What makes forest fires go off?
So this is the famous 2-minute Canadian match drop test, which really is the foundation of our system. You would go off into the bush like we just did and light a wooden match, put it down, and watch it for 2 minutes.
Mike Watton is an eminent research scientist working for the Canadian Forest Service. His specialty, fire behavior.
This one didn't spread. It was only the match burning. And so this tells me that this fuel is not flammable today. I can tell how quickly this took off, that the fuels are very flammable here, so this area would be at a high fire risk.
Starting shortly after the big burn, the Canadian scientists performed no less than 30,000 match tests over 30 years to uncover the hidden mechanism of flammability.
The basis of how fire spreads all comes down to what we call the fire triangle. On one side of this triangle, we have oxygen. We need oxygen to burn. On another side, we need fuel to burn as well. And on the other, we have energy, a source of heat. And so we need all of these three sides of the triangle for fire to continue. I take one of them away, and that reaction doesn't work anymore, and your fire goes out.
If a fire takes hold or not depends on a complex interaction between numerous elements: fuel, moisture levels, temperature, topography, wind, weather. The Canadian scientists are the inventors of an ingenious system of universal warning signs. Countries all across the globe have adopted the system. Here's an example of how the risk level is calculated. Imagine you have a hot day and plenty of dry fuel, but there is no lightning or wind, so the risk is low. Or is it? Actually, it's a weekend and people are heading out to the countryside to light campfires. And a lightning storm is expected for later. And now, global warming is pushing risk levels further into the red.
For about a 1 degree increase in air temperature, you see about a 12% increase in lightning activity. So not only are the fuels more receptive to ignition from any individual lightning strike, but we have more lightning strikes dominating our landscape. So there's a multiplicative factor there.
More megafires are coming our way. But once ignited, how does a fire grow into a raging megafire that is beyond human control? We've come to Montana, site of the Big Burn in 1910, to unravel the innermost mechanisms of fire.
So this is the Missoula Fire Sciences Laboratory. The entire building is filled with people studying fire, many different aspects of fire: ecology, atmospheric science, smoke chemistry, and fire behavior.
This is one of the largest and oldest fire labs in the world. Here, scientists get right inside the mind of fires like the beast to find out how they feed themselves.
So this is our burn chamber. This is where we do many kinds of experiments, burning different kinds of fuels, and all of them produce a lot of smoke. That's why we have to have a very large ventilation system to remove all that smoke.
Clear, coming up.
This apparatus is a big tilting sand burner. We call it Big Sandy. It consists of a sandbox here in the middle where we pump gas so we can control exactly the characteristics of the flame zone. This is very much like an arbitrary segment of a large wildland fire that's spreading outward. And so what we're trying to understand with this apparatus is how the heat is transferred. Ready? Okay, go ahead.
Every minute counts when fighting a wildfire. Crews can only save lives and homes if they are in the right place at the right time. But until recently, fire spread could not be predicted for more than 30 minutes in advance because its mechanism was unknown. Now, Mark and his team have solved the ancient riddle.
You can see very clearly those peaks and troughs, right? Those are actually key to how fires behave and how fires spread. Flame gases are very low density and they want to rise up. But in order for them to rise, cold air has to come down and replace the volume vacated by that rising parcel of hot air. That sets up a repeating pattern of hot flames rising, cold air descending, hot flames rising, cold air descending. And it's in the troughs where the cold air is descending that it's pushing the flames down into the fuel.
And this forces them onto the fresh fuel just ahead. The flame front advances.
If this fire did not have the peak and trough pattern, you would not get it to spread.
Finally, the secret is unraveled of how fire spreads, well, like wildfire. This paves the way for a new generation of fire science and better strategies for those battling the flames on the front line.
Yeah, it's going to be hot. We'll definitely have to get Ray-Bans for everybody.
Yeah. And we're going to have to invest in sunscreen. Sunscreen and Ray-Bans.
The voracious appetite of today's megafires knows no boundaries. The secret behind this, airflow and wind. Combustion specialist Sarah McAllister has found a way to simulate the process. First, she simulates an ordinary wildfire.
So normally I let it burn a little bit here. When you can see it, there's a lot of unburnt fuel in there. So it's not burning very well.
The plume of the fire is narrow, so the flames can pull in fresh replacement air from all sides.
But then I push it in here.
Now, using a chimney, Sarah simulates the airflow of a megafire.
It burns much faster, much more cleanly, and you get sparks out the top. Get all those embers. So you can hear the flow that it creates.
This flow is the result of an astonishing mechanism.
As the fuels accumulate and you get more and more fuel down on the ground, they burn longer. So instead of having a simple line of fire, you end up with an area of fuel that's on fire. So as that area gets bigger and bigger, the plume above it gets wider and wider.
Hot air rushes upwards and forms a natural chimney, which blocks the air coming in from above and the sides. Instead, the fire sucks in fresh air from down below, generating strong winds on the ground. The fire creates its very own wind machine to fan the flames.
You're essentially blowing on the coals of the fire, right? If you've ever played with a campfire and you blow on it, you can see it glows a lot hotter, and stuff that was already burning is going to burn much faster. Stuff that was smoldering is then going to transition to flame, and so you're going to involve more fuels that weren't going to burn without that wind.
A megafire is born. The rising heat and wind turbulence can even spin into fire tornadoes, so-called firenadoes, which can reach the force of a hurricane and temperatures of 1,000 degrees Celsius. In the age of megafires, firenadoes are becoming more and more common.
Oh my God. Look at that. Holy shit.
Let's see how this wind machine led to the inferno in Fort McMurray. Mike Flanagan has uncovered how the mechanism enabled the beast to conquer an entire town.
The Fort McMurray fire was a very intense fire. Trees burned, vegetation burned, houses burned. This whole valley was burned. This fire spread all the way to Saskatchewan, which is close to 100 kilometers away.
The secret, a monstrous meteorological recipe that was first unraveled in Fort McMurray.
Combustion is part of a wildfire. In the combustion process, it releases heat, but also moisture. And this moisture and heat rise. And just like your grade 3 water cycle, air rises, cools, condenses, forms clouds.
This cloud is called a pyrocumulonimbus. Its appetite is insatiable. It sucks in hot air, moisture, soot, and burning branches to create its very own weather system, complete with rain, lightning, and thunder. Like normal thunderstorms, pyro-CBs can last for several hours.
This would generate very intense conditions. It would not be safe to fight a fire like this. And these fires are like thunderstorms.
They have the power to send embers and lightning far ahead of the fire, sparking new ignitions all over the region. Firefighters on the ground were overwhelmed and faced with tough decisions.
This area sits on a kind of a corner. You go left to Wood Buffalo and right to Dickensfield. And we had to choose if we were going to defend Wood Buffalo or Dickensfield. We decided to defend the Dickensfield stretch of forest. And we ended up being able to stop the fire from getting into that neighborhood. And we felt pretty good about ourselves. We felt like heroes, actually. We felt like superheroes in that moment. And we packed up our hoses. We drove around the corner into Wood Buffalo, only to discover that 60 houses were on fire. That was a difficult moment for us. Logically, we look back, and the decision we made was the right one. Right doesn't always make you feel better, though.
The fire of Fort McMurray has been studied by scientists all around the globe. Their investigations reveal that the impact doesn't stop here.
It was summer 2017, August, lazy holiday season, and we heard on the news that there was very intense fires going on in northwest Canada.
Sergei Kaikin is from Russia and a specialist in the impact of volcanic eruptions. But the era of megafires has expanded his field of study.
I thought, why not check whether we see something in the LiDAR measurements here at the station.
LiDARs measure objects by bouncing laser beams off them.
The laser beam comes out of there, gets commuted through these mirrors, and then it is sent to the beam expander of the telescope. So the beam expands and it is sent into the atmosphere. And then with the telescope, we get the scattered signal back from as high as 100 kilometers high. And that's how we get the information on the composition of the atmosphere.
In addition to the LiDAR at the station, Sergei also used the space-based Calypso LiDAR, which covers the entire globe.
When I actually checked at the data from the LiDARs, I saw something really extraordinary. These intense fires in Canada, they sent lots of smoke and ice into the stratosphere. And then these plumes, they crossed the Atlantic in just 1 week and arrived in Europe.
Passing through Europe on its way east, the smoke created a series of stunning sunsets.
And then the smoke went further to Siberia and then crossed the globe in only 2 weeks. And we have been seeing it in the stratosphere for at least 7 months that followed the fire event. This is the signal that comes after moderate volcanic eruption, and this one is from this Megafire event in 2017. We found that the wildfires can have as large impact on the atmosphere as the moderate volcanic eruptions.
Sergei was the first scientist to discover that the reach of megafires is global and out of the ordinary. Every fire season, our entire airspace fills up with smoke. We urgently need to find out more about the chemical composition of what we're taking in with every breath. NASA has launched an international airborne science expedition to investigate the potential impact of this new type of pollution. One of the mission controllers is Bob Yokelson from Montana University, who has dedicated his life to understanding wildfire smoke.
This plane is the world's most advanced flying laboratory. The summary of the flight plan for today is to head to the Sheridan Fire in southern Arizona.
There, the team members are planning to collect fresh smoke samples for their research, with the help of pioneering prototypes.
You have to bring the lab to the fire, to the smoke, to better understand the thousands of chemicals that are emitted in fresh smoke, and then how those change as the smoke evolves in the atmosphere.
When the plane reaches the smoke plume, we get strong turbulence caused by the hot air rising from the fire.
When we're flying really big fires and we have to make maneuvers like that, it can feel like you're on a roller coaster, which is fun, but you don't want to be on a roller coaster for 8 hours. It's kind of a high intensity type of work, but it's also awesome being able to see the measurements that we're making in real time.
The full analysis of all the new data will take years, but Bob is already sounding the alarm bells. The health risks linked to wildfire smoke are enormous.
There's a lot of concerns about smoke. For instance, the particles are solid or liquid droplets, and they can clog the passageways in your lungs, and they can also inject poison into your bloodstream along with the toxic gases. And when those poisons get in your bloodstream, that actually changes your biochemistry in your body, and that can lead to heart disease. There's even a statistic called premature deaths. We know that these premature deaths increase as pollution increases.
In our fire-prone world, respiratory diseases, including asthma, are on the increase. And a vital activity like breathing is becoming a deadly risk. In the tropical forest, scientists have discovered yet another major impact caused by extreme wildfires. In Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Amazon, rampant deforestation for the purpose of agriculture is responsible for an especially risky type of blaze, fires on peat soil. In Indonesia, this has had terrible consequences. Bongbong Hero Sahajo works for the government. He is investigating the site of an illegal deforestation.
Sampai dengan sekarang, saya menangani hampir sekitar 500 kasus sejak tahun 2000 tersebut. Dan ini adalah arang bekas terbakar, dan kemudian itu tumbuhan bawah bekas terbakar. Nah, kenapa ini diambil? Ini untuk membuktikan bahwa yang benar terjadi kebakaran, ya. Permukaan seperti ini. Ini nanti dianalisis untuk melihat dampak dari pembakaran ini.
Indonesia produces 30% of the world's palm oil. As demand soars, so do the fires. Here, a palm oil company may have used slash and burn to extend their plantation.
Dia sudah nebas ini nih. Jadi sebelum bakar ditebas. Jadi memang sudah ada niat untuk membersihkan ini.
Before planting the oil palms, canals are dug to drain the moist soil. This lowers the water table by up to 30 centimeters, leaving the peat dry and flammable. This burn patch is not yet another illegal fire. Here, an international team of scientists is recreating the illegal burns to study their consequences.
We are in plot 1, where we are going to simulate the effect of slash and burn.
Peat burns differently than trees, for a reason.
Peat is an organic soil, but it doesn't burn with a flame. It burns smoldering, flameless. The fire can actually penetrate deep inside, and it goes underground, and it's the soil itself that is burning. It's not the vegetation, it's actually the soil.
Invisibly, the fires burrow deep into the ground.
Peat fires are the largest fires on Earth. They actually can burn away from view for a very long time, for weeks, for months. We've seen fires that are as deep as 2 meters. In specific locations, it creates holes, which are very deep. A person goes into the hole, it disappears from view. Smoldering combustion is the most persistent type of fire on Earth because it's the easiest to be initiated and the most difficult to be suppressed. It rained 3 times, actually, tropical rain, a lot of rain, and the fires were not suppressed by this rain.
Back in his lab in London, Guillermo is tackling an even more treacherous aspect of the peat fires.
And this is our special peat that comes from garden certains in Ireland. Our students from Ireland think that the lab smells like home because in Ireland they burn it at fireplaces. And our Scottish students think that it smells like their peaty whiskey.
Guillermo's team is the only research facility on the globe dedicated wholly to the study of peat fires.
Peat is how nature stores carbon. It's a way of storing the carbon for a very long time. It's vegetation that has died, but it doesn't degrade. It actually stays in the water as a solid, and the deeper you go in the peat, the older the peat it is. It could be from 100 years to 1,000 years. That's a very ancient soil that was captured a long time ago.
When peat smolders, generations of captured carbon are released into our atmosphere all at once.
As trees or biomass grow, they take carbon from the atmosphere and they release oxygen. And then the fire is the opposite. Literally, fire is the opposite of photosynthesis. It actually releases the carbon into the atmosphere and it consumes the oxygen. So the growing of a forest, the antithesis is the burning of a forest.
And all the while, the peat hardly looks like it's burning at all. Only the high-speed infrared camera captures the fire spreading outwards until all the biomass has been consumed and the carbon released.
The emissions from a peat fire are massive, are 10 to 100 times larger than flaming fires. So the footprint is very, very large. It's the elephant in the room of carbon emissions.
And this footprint is about to become even larger as the fires expand to new peat-rich areas of the tropical forest in Brazil and Peru. And there is another carbon bomb ready to go off. Megafires are also attacking the boreal forests, rich in peat, in Canada, Alaska, Scandinavia, the UK, and even Siberia.
The Earth is getting warmer, and the boreal region warms faster than other regions. The scary thing is peatlands cover only 3% of the land surface, but they store a lot of carbon, maybe 25% of all global carbon stocks. So if the fires move into there, you get very high emissions per area burned.
That is leading to climate change, is leading to places where the soil will be warmer and drier, which then will lead to even more fires, which will lead to more emissions. So obviously that creates a positive feedback mechanism. Between more peat fires means more peat fires in the future.
And if this increases global warming in general, the number of wildfires will soar.
The spiral can just go on until there's nothing left to burn. People ask me, well, if we see a lot more fire, won't the trees disappear? And they're absolutely right. If we continue to see increasing fire activity, the trees will disappear. But what will replace it?
Things are changing, and they're changing very rapidly. And unless we adapt to those changes, we're going to have landscapes out there that are unrecognizable.
Where will you go when your forests are no longer green, but they're black and gone? Where will you go to breathe deep and slow?
Every time there is a megafire, a community faces the challenge of recovering from an encounter with the beast. Several years after the fire, Fort McMurray is physically being rebuilt, but homes recover faster than people.
So let's take a moment to pray for each other. Let's take a moment to pray for everybody who is coming to our service. And Father God, this morning, we just take a moment before
Lucas has left his job as a firefighter and become a pastor.
today, that we would do it for the sake of your kingdom and for your glory. I think the rate of alcohol consumption in the people I worked with just skyrocketed, myself personally too. You guys excited? Come on, let's do it. Everybody in. the timeline after major disasters like this, you see domestic violence increase, you see suicides increase, you see substance abuse increase. All of those things we have seen in our city. All of those things are on the rise.
I'll raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemy.
Lucas and fellow church members raised funds for psychological counseling for local people and firefighters.
Louder than the unbelief. I'll raise a hallelujah.
The scientists tell us that for our forest to recover and to look like it did before the fire is over 200 years. For us as a people who experienced it, I don't think it will ever leave us. Emotionally and psychologically, it'll be something that is part of us now. It's part of our story.
All over the world, unless we find new solutions, more megafires like the Beast will take their tribute from our communities. We have tampered with nature and created this crisis. Now, it's up to us to find out how we can save our habitat and our lives before it is too late. Frank Crum is a great expert on forest dynamics, working in Switzerland. He is determined to find out which role fire played in our forests before the age of megafires. After all, fire has always been part of nature. To get started, Frank is headed to a former military bunker from World War II. These hidden tunnels lead to the biggest collection of tree samples in Europe. Some of these samples are 14,000 years old.
Trees have the nice ability to preserve different information in their rings. They work as an autobiography for a tree. And we can see different kind of signals. We can see climatic signals, we can see physical influences like damages and so on. And we can also see environmental conditions. These are two samples from two different regions. So this one here is from a very cold region, and you can see very tiny rings. The vegetation period is really short, and the trees are growing very, very slowly. And here, the tree rings are much bigger because the conditions are better for the tree. So they have the same diameter, but this tree is about 25 years old, and this tree is about 300 years old. Here we can see a very narrow ring in 2003 as a consequence of a very dry year.
Another tree ring bears witness to a rockfall. And yet another to the year without summer in 1816, when a volcano outbreak blocked the sunlight. Fire, too, leaves its traces, but not as we might expect.
This tree from southern Switzerland shows several scars, fire scars. Here a fire scar, here a fire scar, and here a fire scar. That means the tree has survived several fire events. One can really nicely see how the tree can overgrow these kind of wounds that are produced by the fires.
The scientists cross-reference weather and climate data for an even more precise tree autobiography.
Here we have an example of a ponderosa pine from Arizona with these fire scars across the whole tree sample. The last one is in 1874, and then there was one 15 years before. So this tree has survived several fires that are recorded here.
This is conclusive evidence that during their evolution, trees learned to live with moderate fires.
Fire and the trees are adapted to each other, and fires are part of the forest ecosystem.
But now, humans have brought destructive megafires upon the forest and upset a delicate balance. Let's find out more about how the forest copes with a moderate fire and even benefits from it.
7 years ago, this landscape burned, about 55,000 acres, and it burned in a moderate severity. And this forest is bouncing back already. You've got this mountain lupin here. This is a nitrogen fixer, and it helps this forest to rebound. It fixes atmospheric nitrogen, and then it leaks it to the neighborhood.
After a moderate fire, colorful little helpers fill up the forest and stimulate regrowth. And trees like the lodgepole pine just love a good fire.
Many species are adapted to fire, but this one here is dependent upon fire to complete its life cycle. It's got these really cool cones. Every one of these cone scales is held closed by a drop of resin. The heat of the fire melts that resin, the cones open, and then the seeds can fall to the ground. A few years later, you can come back and see baby seedlings, the lodgepole pine, filling in under the blackened trees. A new forest. Here, wildfire is part of a cycle of renewal. And it wouldn't have been this way if it had been a big, hot megafire. You wouldn't have had the seedlings. You wouldn't have had the source of plant life that developed here after the fire.
Fires can help our forests bounce back with new vigor.
We've been thinking about wildfire for a long time in the wrong way. There's no way to keep it out of the ecosystem. We have to invite it back in and dance with the beast.
Dancing with the enemy might save our lives. But for that, we need to overcome our fear of fire. Sonia Leverkus, a Canadian fire ecologist and firefighter, has come to meet a people who have a completely different relationship with fire.
I'm Chief Marvin Yahi with the Blueberry First Nations, and this is the territory of Blueberry First Nations. We have 3,000 plus square kilometers of hunting territory here.
I can't wait to see all of the bison.
Fire is important. It plays a large role and always has in First Nations people. My dad was my teacher. He lived off the land. He was a trapper and a hunter. He taught all his boys why fire was needed and explained the dangers of it as not to be played with. It's important, and that also fire can be your friend, he says, and your enemy at the same time.
Now, Sonia teaches young firefighters how many indigenous tribes in both Canada and the U.S. knew all along how to use fire as a tool.
Paradoxically, it was the Indian custom of frequent light burning that had produced and maintained much of the land that white settlers were then able to farm. These open grasslands proved very attractive to the white settler.
People thought this was a natural thing that happened, and they were really, really excited, but little did they know they needed to continue applying fire to the land in order to maintain and to keep the patchwork mosaic on the land.
Fire as a tool was outlawed, and the tradition largely forgotten. Only a few tribes, like Chief Marvin's, have preserved it.
We have a bird's eye view living in the area just to understand and work with fire.
Okay, so
We're willing to share our knowledge and work with people.
Sonia is updating the ancient tradition with modern science. First step, preparation. In today's dense and overgrown forests, a clear boundary needs to be set around the entire plot for the planned fire.
when we blackline, we actually remove the fuel component of the fire triangle. So when a fire approaches a blackline, then the fire no longer can spread because the fuel has been removed from that area.
Sonia's team also adds a wet line to strengthen the boundary.
The great moment has come where we've completed our wet line around the outside edge. We've also done black lining against the wet line. And if the wind condition is right and we get wind from the west, the fire will roll across here and it will stop against our black line. This might look like a ping pong ball, but actually it's filled with potassium permanganate, which gets injected with glycol and makes it highly flammable. That happens through this machine that I have in the helicopter with me.
So-called prescribed fires or controlled burns are the modern version of a traditional burn to maintain the patchwork in the forest. They are now making a comeback as an efficient fire prevention tool in Canada and the US, and are even being introduced in Europe. Helicopters make the process faster and less risky for the firefighters and allow them to reach difficult terrain. The fire just scratches the surface and is done in an hour.
We light fires because that is also part of firefighting. Prescribed fire keeps the land healthy.
But there are areas where prescribed fires are a huge risk. For instance, right next to a community. John Wilbrandt is one of hundreds of millions of people all over the world who live in the so-called wildland-urban interface. These dream homes have become deadly fire traps because humans and the forest share the same space.
We were well aware that one day we might be fighting a fire to try and save our home.
The race is on to find viable solutions to survive extreme wildfire in these areas. Example, California. In December 2017, a spark from a faulty power line ignited the parched and overgrown landscape, a frequent cause of fire where humans want to live in nature with all the amenities. Spurred on by ferocious winds, the fire soon grew into a megafire.
I could look out the window at night as I went to bed, and I could see the fire for a couple of nights in a row as it burned closer and closer.
John and his partner Jean-Claude decided to stay and defend their home.
What I remember the most of the fire was the sound. The roar, the intent was like a freight train coming towards you. We were encircled by fire on at least 3 sides. I took one side of the house, he took the other, and during the entire fire, we didn't know whether the other one had survived the fire. Okay, we made it. Both Jean-Claude and I, we made it okay. The horses made it. The donkeys made it. The cows made it. Oh, my studio did not make it. The fire found its way underneath the shipping containers, and all of my archives, all record of my life as an artist from when I was a teenager up until 2005, I have lost.
As the blaze continued, many more homes were lost to the flames. And the firefighters were powerless until the fire raced inland towards 2 fire breaks. One was a scar created by a big fire in 2010, which stopped the flames. Another was a fire break from the 1960s.
On this ridge, what we can see is the vast backcountry behind Santa Barbara. And as we look to the south side of this ridge, we can see the dense communities of the South Coast. And you get the visual here of how much area there is to burn that can impact the communities.
1463, you got it?
Rob and his colleagues knew that this was their only chance.
We lit a backfire across this ridge line. The grass was cleared off with mechanical equipment, and we were able to burn along this ridge using our fire to take out the fuel bed in between the main fire and this ridge line.
When the fire arrived at the fire break, the fire crews were ready and waiting.
The fire reduces its intensity when it burns into the fuel break. The flame lengths are smaller, it's more controllable, and the firefighters have places to go if things get out of control. Our burning operation was successful. We stopped the fire on this ridge line.
But many interface areas do not have fire breaks to protect them from megafires.
We want our cake and want to be able to eat it too. It's nice to get away from busy urban centers, but it's unrealistic to expect that those places are going to be safe from natural processes.
Probably 2/3 to 3/4 of all new housing starts in the Western U.S. are being developed in very flammable and dangerous circumstances. We have to come up with a more clever proposal for how we live in these areas. We cannot just keep sprawling outward because we can't keep you safe.
Millions of people are at risk in zones that are becoming increasingly prone to fire. A scientist at the Missoula Fire Sciences Lab has dedicated his career to finding out what really happens when a fire invades a community.
We think of the relationship between the extreme wildfire and the home destruction as being the dragon from hell cascading down the hills and laying the community to waste. Or we see it as a tsunami of flame, flooding across the community. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Equally improbable was a conspiracy theory around a series of images of burnt homes next to healthy trees.
It must have been DEW, capital D, capital E, capital W, directed energy weapons. And you would see this on social media. I mean, you have to answer the question that opens a whole can of worms as to why anybody would have wanted to do that.
Jack Cohen set a whole experimental forest on fire to prove that the heat of the flames is not sufficient to ignite a home.
As the view clears, you see a scorched but not ignited wall section, nicely framed by the cracked lens.
Now, Jack's research is the basis of an experiment which revealed what really causes the ignition of a home.
The very intense wildfire is producing lots of firebrands that then can cast down, can shower down way ahead, kilometers, miles ahead of this intense flame front. Pine needles that have accumulated in the rain gutters, the cotton fabrics of patio furniture, the wood and the debris that we might have on a deck. Those are the things that make the house vulnerable to ignition.
And once a house is on fire, it produces its own embers, setting off a chain reaction.
The wildfire actually doesn't spread through the community. The burning things in the community end up igniting the rest of the community. But does that mean that communities burning up during wildfires is inevitable? No. It's a home ignition problem rather than a wildfire control problem.
In Southern California, communities are in a race against time to apply this discovery to millions of homes.
In more recent years, it seems like there's fires almost, we recover from one and there's another one. And if it's not here, it's close enough that we worry for friends or, you know, the cities nearby. And the only part that hasn't burned is the part directly above me. My mom is terrified that I live here. She thinks I should leave because fires are so dangerous. I live in a condo. It's wood. I know that it's not landscaped the way that it should be.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
I'm Jenny.
Hi, I'm Amber with the fire department.
Thank you so much for coming. Should we?
Yeah, let's go take a look around.
Looking forward to.
Wildfire specialists like Amber are inspecting homes one by one to try and make them less flammable.
One thing that does concern me would be the mulch that you have around the side of your structure. What mulch does is it provides a receptive bed or a place where that ember can land and ignite. Okay. So one of the things that you can do is create a buffer, such as rocks or sand. Dirt would be acceptable and fine.
That's cheap.
Anything that just won't carry fire up against the side of your home.
Okay.
Look at all this peely bark.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
definitely a spot that embers like to land. See this, how there's an opening in this doorway that allows embers to get right inside your structure.
Yeah.
So this would be a weakness. Actually, our neighbors over there have a great example by installing some metal mesh screening right behind those vents.
So I could just put something right behind it.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's easy.
This is an example of ladder fuel, where we have a constant stream of vegetation that goes from the ground all the way up into that upper canopy.
Oh, wow. So what do I do about it?
We want to essentially remove the rungs of the ladder, and we do that by pulling this tree down completely out of the canopy of that upper tree. You can still leave it, but let's create some separation.
The reality living so close to other people is that even if I can do everything perfectly to protect myself, if the neighbors don't do it, it's not gonna help. If they're not protecting their area, then my area is just as vulnerable.
In Europe as well, Many of us enjoy living or spending our holidays near nature in the interface, especially in the Mediterranean. But the closer we build to the forest, the better the reach of the flames. Combine this with the increasing drought, and you have millions of people at risk. In Portugal in 2017, 4 large wildfires killed 66 people. Fires have also been wreaking havoc in Spain, Cyprus, and the south of France. In 2018, 100 people lost their lives in Mati in Greece. Gavrilis Xantopoulos, co-author of a government report about the growing fire risk in Greece, is investigating what turned a peaceful holiday destination into a fire trap.
It's difficult for unprepared, untrained people to make correct decisions. Many people think that, okay, with a car, it's just 3-minute drive to get to the main street. But 3 minutes drive under normal conditions. Not when there are hundreds of people on that same narrow street, when there is gases and smoke. The first person who panicked, left his car in the middle of the street and ran to the sea, the rest of the people were stuck. And this is exactly what happened. More than 60 cars were stuck in that point, and most of them burned. And the people who tried to live on foot, they met with this type of wall that would not allow them to pass through.
26 people perished here, just a few meters from the sea.
Here we have one of the exits, one of the passages towards the sea. And you can see how narrow it is and how hidden it is. Think about people in panic trying to find an exit, and there is no sign. Even now, it would be very easy to miss it.
There was no official strategy in place, even for those who escaped to the beach.
Some people tried to swim further, and they were picked up by the waves and taken deep in the sea. Some drowned, some were able to survive when they were rescued by boats 2 or 3 kilometers in the sea.
So why is Mati such a labyrinth?
There was not any strict urban planning and any strict building code of the houses. There were many houses built in topography that was not appropriate for such a urban interface area. This area in general started as an agricultural area. We should not legalize houses which are built in such places.
But even after the fire, construction continues unchecked.
We need to put this knowledge in our actions, and there needs to be some practical information passed on to the people. I can find myself in the path of a fire. So I need to have the basic knowledge, not to fear, but to be prepared. In the same way that in Greece we have learned what to do in case of an earthquake, and all these things.
We need to take wildfire just as seriously as other major catastrophes if we want our families to be safe in these areas. In Portugal, political will has already led to action. Carlos Trindade is in charge of fire prevention in the Mafra region near Lisbon.
The goal for today is to burn this plot over here. And why we are doing this? We have ignitions over here. The fire comes in these directions. And with this full breaks with the prescribed burnings, we can protect this village over here and these structures over here.
In this area, like all over the Mediterranean, the rural population has largely abandoned farming and started a new life in the cities.
The causes of the fire are social. We have unmanaged land and more fuel loads and eucalyptus and pine trees, and all these combined, we don't have places to stop wildfires.
Now, Carlos and his team are combining the role of firefighter with that of land manager to stop extreme wildfires in their tracks. Similar projects also exist in France and in Spain.
Before 2006, we have more or less 500 ignitions a year and more or less 500 hectares burned a year. And now, after 12 years of these new dynamics with the strong politician support, we have reduced ignitions in 50% and we reduce the burnt area in 80%.
Pompiers, bonjour. Oui, je vous écoute. On a un départ de feu? Sur quelle commune, s'il vous plaît?
Firefighters are preparing themselves for a new era with more ferocious and complex wildfires. Colonel Grégory Allione is the chief strategist for the French government.
Un feu de forêt qu'on a laissé s'échapper, c'est des mégawatts de puissance. C'est une centrale nucléaire qui se déplace toute seule. On dit souvent que tout se joue dans les 10 premières minutes et qu'il y a la phase critique à une demi-heure, 3/4 d'heure. Tout se joue entre 10 et 60 minutes.
With the impact of climate change, now there are many more people to protect than before.
Dans un temps où le sud de la France était le seul territoire confronté aux feux de forêt, seul le sud de la France et le sud-ouest, les Landes de Gascogne, ont expérimenté, ont mis en œuvre régulièrement. Aujourd'hui, il va falloir déployer cette stratégie sur l'ensemble du territoire national. Toute la France va devoir apprendre à taper vite et fort, à mettre des moyens très rapidement avant que le feu ne prenne une ampleur qui ne soit plus humaine.
Envoie-moi le 30, 24, 23, en plein pilote.
Technology on its own is powerless against a megafire. But with new prevention strategies to make our landscapes less flammable, our firefighters have a chance. At this unique training site in Marseille, fire crews from the north of France, Northern Europe, and even China and Russia are getting ready for the challenge.
Nous avons une trentaine d'arbres en fer, en cortène. On essaie de se rapprocher au plus près du terrain réel. Les arbres, on ne peut pas faire brûler des arbres qui sont dans la nature pour s'amuser. Donc on a créé un système en fer où on peut faire brûler indéfiniment les arbres, mettre le feu indéfiniment et recommencer tous les jours et plusieurs fois par jour.
L'autre intérêt, c'est de partager, c'est de transmettre toutes nos expériences en termes d'échecs, en termes de réussite, parce que cette transmission, elle permet de sauver des vies.
The French firefighters form part of a new European Union network, where crews from 34 countries have joined forces to extinguish fires all over Europe, sharing resources and cost. Example, Sweden in 2018.
Sous l'étiquette Union européenne, nous avions aussi bien des pays plutôt habitués aux feux de forêt, comme le Portugal, la France, l'Italie, mais également des voisins de la Suède, comme la Pologne, l'Allemagne, la Lituanie, le Danemark.
This European collaboration provides a glimpse of the future of firefighting.
À chaque situation, il faut s'adapter. L'homme a beau se développer, l'homme a beau faire tout ce qu'il veut en matière d'innovation technologique, a beau s'adapter, mais le feu, l'eau, tous ces éléments naturels nous font comprendre que la nature reprend toujours ses droits.
I live in, a fire-adapted ecosystem, so fire is going to be here no matter what. You learn to live with it. You look at the weather forecast, it's going to rain Saturday, so you don't plan to be outside Saturday. So same thing with smoke. If there's a big fire coming in, and it's just like any other kind of weather pattern that you have to plan around.
You don't want to think about it because it's so scary if you do, but you have to be prepared for it every day. After the last few fires and packing and unpacking, I finally decided to keep my most important things in a box ready to go. It's got things like important papers, some family treasures, memories, some photos, and everything is close to my front door. So if nothing else could get grabbed, it would be easy to get that box and get out of the house.
The Pyrocene, the age of fire, is here to stay whether we like it or not. And time is running out.
We are in the middle of an unplanned experiment on planet Earth. We have no other planet to go to. This is the only place we can live. What will the future hold?
How do we want our fire and smoke? How do you want it? Do you want it big and hot and unbridled and belching smoke? We can't be just moving deck chairs on a sinking ship. We have about 20 years to get the needed work done.
We've got the technological tools, we've got the science, we know what it takes, we know how these forests work. If we don't take any action today, certainly it's kicking the can down the road for future generations.
Can we find a way to live with fire before it is too late?
In a perfect world, we would put out our lawn chairs in our backyards and we would watch it burn across the hillside. And we would feel that we could live with it and we wouldn't feel threatened by it.
To survive the age of megafires, we need to become, once again, a fire-adapted species and make peace with both fire and the forest. Can we learn to tame the beast and live to tell the tale?